The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds.
You're listening to Rooted in Organic Podcast. Mike Klein along with Brian Wood. Today we are talking with Preston Green. Preston Green worked at Organic Valley. I met him about 13 years ago. He was in the sales part of the meat company within Organic Valley, and then left, and I've stayed in touch, and he worked at Hickory Nut Gap Meats and now has a new venture. So Preston, thanks for joining us today. And can you just give us a little bit of your background?
Yeah. When you ask me about background, it's kind of funny to look back on things and go through the timeline. But I'm sitting here drinking coffee out of my Organic Valley coffee mug that has a few chips in the rim, and the wording is kind of faded a little bit. But I stole this coffee mug when I was at a sales meeting, and it's probably 15 or 16, maybe even older. And it's the only coffee mug I've got that's that old that doesn't have a handle broken on it. So, Organic Valley in crop cooperative has been a huge part of my life, even till today. We started milking cows organically in the early 90s. I think 92 is when we started making our transition. And, I don't remember farming really any other way than grazing dairy cows and raising corn and soybeans and all of our feed organically, and just, farming that way. So I grew up kind of in the organic movement in Southwest Wisconsin. Dad had moved to Southwest Wisconsin back in the 80s and met my mom and started our family there, and moved to their farm that they bought before I was born. And I kind of grew up dairying and grew up in the dairy industry, and kind of grew up not really enjoying every aspect of it. So I found myself surprised about 10 years ago when I told my wife that I wanted to start milking cows. And we wanted to get back to farming and that kind of thing. So fast forward from the early 90s of growing up milking cows and dairying organically, we went, I went to high school and started playing sports and doing all kinds of things and being a part of different things and clubs and groups. And my parents ended up selling dairy cows and focusing on the beef herd. And we switched all of our organic dairy herd to organic beef production and started finishing cattle for Organic Prairie at the time. And I got into the meat business that way because my mom was direct marketing beef and we were selling cattle to Organic Prairie. And I started my own beef and meat company when I was in college, and kind of followed in my mom's footsteps on the sales side there, and learned the meat business, learned how to sell. I was driving 3.5 hours one way to pick up beef and throw it in a freezer and take it up to Minneapolis and run a meat route and sell meat and deal with customers. And I was probably 19 years old at the time. And so I kind of got a small education in the meat business, and I was buying cattle actually from Organic Prairie after we sold all, most of the cattle we had available for our direct marketing business, and kind of fell into working in sales with Organic Prairie, and got a chance to be a part of probably one of the highest powered sales teams in the industry. By far the highest powered sales team in the natural food industry, and got to learn, that side of it. Got to be in meat plants and got to be sit in on customer calls and kind of learn the business. And next thing you know, I'm selling dairy and produce and cheese and butter and everything Organic Valley does, and selling meat, and get to travel and meet customers and manage a territory. I think it was a $65 million territory at the time, and just had a very amazing opportunity to learn how food gets from the farm gate to the processing plant to the customer, to the stores, to the customer through distributors, and just that whole side of things. So I got a really neat opportunity there. And then after about, I don't know, almost 10 years of working with Organic Valley, I had an opportunity to move to North Carolina and not just work for a meat company, a small meat company that was less than a $5 million meat company at the time when I got here. But we got to also start the farm. And before we had left and moved, my wife and I were looking at farms in Wisconsin. And I told her that in 10 years, I want to be full-time farming. I don't want to travel for work anymore. I was kind of burnt out traveling, to be honest. Not burnt out at the time before we moved and came to work for Hickory Nut Gap, but I was feeling, that stress of having to constantly be on the go and constantly dealing with customers and whatnot, and really felt like I wanted to give my kids the opportunities that I had by creating an environment where we could all work together and work towards something and work towards building something. And so I told my wife, and within 10 years, I want to be full-time farming. That was our plan. So when the opportunity came up to work with Hickory Nut Gap, I got a chance to move to North Carolina and start, farming. We bought our beef herd. We were managing a 250-acre farm. We were renting ground and doing all kinds of stuff. And I was working in sales for them, but then also managing their farm side and their supply chain, working on kind of developing their regenerative claim, working with the Savory Institute and getting farms enrolled in Savory, and working with customers like Applegate and Whole Foods and Butcher Box and a bunch of people in the Southeast, and expanding into the Northeast. And we're having a great time doing that, and just had the chance and an opportunity with a neighbor to partner up and start a dairy, and decided that it was the right time to move on from that company to where we are now, building and continually creating Big Bottom Milk Company. So we're milking 61 cows this morning, waiting on about 6 or 8 to calve, and we got a bunch of heifers getting ready to calve, so that's always fun. The thing I don't miss about farming and milking cows is milking heifers. I don't like training heifers. That's not something I enjoy, but we do it, obviously. But we're grazing the Jersey herd, and had an opportunity to buy just a phenomenal group of cows. And we've been so blessed here in the last 2 years. So October 1st of 2023, we started milking. Second week of March, we started bottling milk of 24, and we're bottling 100% of what we produce now at the dairy, and selling it basically from Asheville, Waynesville area, Western North Carolina, up into Virginia, down into over in Raleigh now, and down in Florida. So we've created a pretty good footprint. Now we're just kind of filling in the gaps, but just a really neat opportunity, really great, just phenomenal product that we're producing, and the cows are the secret, and taking care of those cows is obviously first and foremost, but it's exciting to be doing something like this when it seems like everyone's getting big or getting out.
So Preston, I want you to take a step back. So you started shipping milk, I imagine, before you built a creamery. Is that right?
Well, so I don't recommend the timeline that we followed when we started the dairy. I quit my job in March of 23, and we got our financing and all of our business plans and everything together in October or August or July of 23, and then we broke ground and started building in August, and we started milking on October 1st.
Oh, so the plan was the creamery all along. Like that was the driving force behind the dairy.
We weren't, the long-term plan was not to ship milk conventionally. And that's what we were doing. We had to ship milk conventionally, and I can't say enough about the impact that cooperatives have had in the dairy industry and the natural food movement. It was a co-op that agreed to pick up our milk. It was a co-op that agreed to help us balance our milk, not just say, hey, we'll pick your milk up if you ship us 100% of what you're producing. We'll come down and get what you need us to take, and we'll send a truck down there for that. So we started shipping milk. We started milking October 1st, and I think we dumped milk for a week while we waited for the paperwork to get done by the state. And within 5 days, I think it was 5 days, our first pickup happened. And you see videos of people that transition to Organic Valley, and they're taking videos of the milk truck backing up to the barn, and they're so excited, and you kind of look at it and you're like, well, that's kind of cool. I don't really understand it necessarily because I don't remember that side of it. For me, growing up, I didn't have an experience with that, but the overwhelming sense of relief of seeing a milk truck back up to your barn to come get your milk, the excitement, the joy, even though we're shipping it conventionally, it was a pretty amazing night. I think he got in there at about 11, and I sat there and waited until he got there because I wanted to be there and shake the guy's hand that was coming to pick it up, because without that co-op, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today. So we shipped milk to the co-op. Even though we started bottling in March, we were only bottling in March probably 10 to 15% of what we needed because we had to go build our business. But then after Hurricane Helene, we were bottling 100%. And so they couldn't come pick up our milk, and they had to shift the routes around, and then they never came back. So we just started bottling 100% of what we had. We had customer demand for it, and we never looked back at that point. So in less than a year, we went from 15% of our milk being bottled in our creamery to 100%, which has been painful in its own way.
And what is your role? Are you the farm manager, the sales guy, the production guy? Are you doing everything, or do you have a sales team in place, or how does this look?
That's a tough question to answer, I guess. Right now, my role is just mechanic and maintenance man. Seems like. But I'm out. I try to milk cows. I manage the dairy herd. I had to breed 14 cows yesterday, which wasn't a lot of fun. We just kind of do what we have to do to get through the day. We have quite a few employees now, really good employees, local folks in the area that, are just phenomenal. My brother helps quite a bit, making deliveries. We've got a pretty good team and staff, but I've never had more respect for what Organic Valley does and other dairy companies do to balance milk and get it from the farm gate to the customer than I do after having to do it even at our scale, because it just takes so much. I think we have 6 or 7 employees now that work at the creamery and the dairy, and it takes everybody, working at least 40 hours a week to make 350 gallons a day disappear. So it's kind of all hands on deck. I try to fill in the gaps. I've been able to step away from production, but for a year, for over a year, I was milking cows every day, twice a day with our help, making sure that our cow herd was taken care of. Because, as you guys know, but not everybody that's listening to the podcast knows, it's a lot of stress to move a herd of dairy cows that, spent their entire life in one spot. So it took a while to get those cows, acclimated. Jerseys are great. We milk jerseys and they're just phenomenal cows. But, that transition time, we were milking, I was milking twice a day. We were running the production plant, grazing, managing grazing and doing all those things. And so I've been able to, our team's really, I think, really phenomenal in the fact that I can kind of give them some of those day-to-day tasks and help out where they need it, and kind of be able to be in 2 or 3 places at once because our team's so versatile. And they are bought in and believe in what we do. And are excited about it and take a lot of pride in the fact that even though it's not necessarily their name on the package, it is their name on the package. And so I don't know how we've gotten so lucky to have the group of people working for us that we do. So I guess my role is just kind of overseeing that production side on the farm and at the plant, and then working on sales, and, doing everything from paying bills to creating invoices to dealing with customer issues to dealing with new customers. Just kind of I try to do everything I can to help make sure the business continues to flourish.
I do want to get into like all those, dig in deep on the growth of the business. But first, you mentioned in there Hurricane Helene hit, and that led to from 15% to 100% being bottled. What was the farm impacted? What the community? What all happened that led to that hurricane impacting the community? Did it impact you? How did it lead to growth? What all happened there?
Well, when Helene hit, I think it was a Thursday. We had a milk pickup the prior day. We didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. We have hurricanes blow over, a couple times a year, and, we might get some trees knocked down, or we might get quite a bit of rain or something like that. But, nothing like we saw with Helene. It was still a formed eye coming right past our dairy. And it was absolutely devastating for us. And we didn't have any cell phone communication for a couple of days. We didn't have any power, so we were running generators to keep the creamery going and the dairy, going. And that Sunday our bulk tank was full, and I got a hold of our guys at the co-op, and they said, well, just dump your milk and we'll figure out a way to pay you guys for it, and just write it down, keep good records. And I couldn't dump the milk. When you're looking around the community, when I say we didn't have power, there was no power. There was no water. There was no nothing. People didn't have food. The thing that I had realized with Helene, and I was thinking about it before I got on the podcast with you guys, is it showed me how fragile society actually is. Most people have maybe a couple of days worth of dry goods in their pantries. They maybe have a day or two's worth of food in their refrigerator. But when you lose power and you lose your refrigerator, you lose your freezer. If you're storing meat, you lose all that. And so we just started bottling milk. And I figured if we just have to give it away, we'll give it away, but I'm not dumping it down the drain. And then the next thing you know, we're bottling water. And I think we bottled about 30,000 gallons of water and got it around to people, because Asheville didn't have water for 2 months. So we started, and there, the milk plant in Western North Carolina, the big one, Melco, they didn't have water. They couldn't wash the plant. They couldn't take in milk. They couldn't get milk out. They were down for a long time. And so we were working with Ingalls at that time, and Ingalls owns Melco, And we just started delivering milk to as many Ingalls stores as we could. We were shipping milk to Johnson on our trucks, not on our distributors' trucks, to the Earth Fare stores in the southeast that we could get to. We were getting milk to our local stores and partners in the area, and we were just doing everything we could to get food out. And we were bottling milk 6-7 days a week. We were bottling water 6-7 days a week if we weren't running milk. And everybody just kind of dug in, and I saw our local community band together in more ways than one. But the biggest way was when we were bottling water till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to get enough to fill up a semi or something like that. It'd be 20-30 people from the community there in the processing plant, which our milk inspector wasn't too excited about, but just filling boxes and stacking milk or stacking water on pallets and wrapping pallets and getting them on trucks and doing everything we could, and just really saw the power of people just kind of coming together. And so we saw a lot of different things, but for the most part, I saw the best things that you'd hope for in a disaster like that. Just a group of people and community members kind of just banding together and trying to figure it out. When the milk truck couldn't come back to pick up, it forced us to figure out what to do with that milk. It forced us, and as a small business, as a dairy, starting out, we had to figure out what to do with that milk. We had to have it go somewhere. There wasn't an option. There had to be dollars reflected in the pounds of milk that we were producing. Otherwise, we wouldn't make it. And so we just, I would load a truck in the morning at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. My brother would jump in that truck and he would drive to wherever the heck I sent him to. And then I'd have another truck loaded. It was like the Milk Pony Express. He'd come back with that truck empty and jump in another truck and go out and deliver. And, it was just constant work and effort. But now we've got to the point where we can, manage a production schedule, and it's not as crazy anymore as it was, but we're still able to sell 100% of our milk. And, Helene was one of those things that everybody was impacted negatively in some way, shape, or form. There were so many dairies that went out of business in Western North Carolina, because their parlor washed away, or their milk room washed away, or their herd of cows was found 3 or 4 miles downstream or something like that. I mean, it's just we were fortunate. And, Sunday after the storm, we're looking around going, what the hell are we going to do? We can't afford to keep putting diesel fuel in tractors for generators, and we can't keep doing what we're doing. And, somebody down east just sent a tank of diesel fuel one day that knew my partner, knew what we were doing and knew what we were going through. And they just showed up with diesel fuel. And then next thing you know, there's fencing supplies for people in the area. And then there's hay coming in for people in the area. And there's, we were just overwhelmed by support from people from all over the country. It was pretty amazing.
So
yeah.
Preston, when I talked to you a couple of weeks ago, I would like you to share the story about like milking the cows actually while the storm was coming. That was nuts.
If there's anybody listening to this podcast that knows me, they know that I'm pretty hard-headed. And that morning I was sleeping on the couch because I had fallen asleep watching the radar and woke up at about 3:30 in the morning to my partner calling me saying, hey, I think we should wait till 10 or 11 o'clock to milk cows today till the storm passes through. And I looked at the radar and I said, yeah, you might be right, but we may not have a dairy barn to milk these cows in. So I think we're going to go ahead and milk and get the cows milk before things get really bad. And he said, I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I said, yeah, we're going to do it. So I drove to the dairy and it was fine. The wind was blowing and there was rain coming down and whatnot. But then all of a sudden, just the bottom fell out when I was going out to get cows. And there was probably 6 or 8 inches of water standing in the pasture. And I had to cross one creek, but there was 2 more creeks that had formed that were about 3 feet deep by the time I got the last cow across. And I got them to the barn, and the cows were all kind of looking at me like, what the hell are you doing? What's going on here? And but we got him in the barn, and my helper, I didn't know if my helper was going to show up or not. I didn't know what the road situation was for him coming in and whatnot, but he was there, and we just started milking, and the next thing you know, the barn's blowing off, the roof's blowing off the barn, and the power goes out, and we hooked the generator up and finished milking cows, and you can hear the trees falling around. I'll never forget the sound of the trees falling, just collapsing around us. You could just hear it, just thundering, and it was deafening. You could hear it over the milk pumps, and it was kind of crazy. But we got milking done, and then we got milking done, and we started, getting other generators hooked up to run waters and wells and stuff like that, and then we go home. And we didn't go home. We got a note somebody got a message into us saying that the Lake Lure Dam was getting ready to go, and the Broad River runs out of Lake Lure, and my help's family lives on the banks of that river, and so we're trying to get out to go get his family, because it was like 33 million gallons of water or something like that in that lake, or I forget what they said it was. But we couldn't get out. We couldn't get away. We couldn't get to the main highway to get to his family, because there's so many trees across the road. My partner was out lifting trees with a tractor just to get people, because people were driving to work that morning. Nobody really thought that any of this was going to be as bad as it was. We didn't have a lot of warning, and so there was people. A tree would fall in front of them on the back road, and they'd go to back up, and a tree would fall behind them. So there's all these trees down and all these people stuck and people's driveways blocked. And finally we got to his place and got his family picked up, and there was trees across his driveway entangled up in power lines, and we get them safe. And then I get to go to my house, and it's probably 2:00 in the afternoon, and I can't get down my driveway. We had 25 trees down across my driveway, and I hadn't talked to my wife all morning. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know if there was a tree on the house. We didn't know anything. But that's nothing. Those stories are nothing compared to stories that I heard of people in the mountains higher up and what they dealt with, because that water had nowhere to go. And there's a lot of people.
Did the Lake Lure Dam go then?
No, it didn't. The Lake Lure Dam didn't go. But there was, in the mountains, towns just devastated, washed away. I remember my brother coming back from delivering milk in Johnson City, and he had to go through a little town, and he said there was about 3 or 4 buildings still standing where this little town was. And he was just in tears talking about how it's just gone. Families getting washed away in their homes just getting caught up in a mudslide, and, the just whole family's entire communities just completely washed away and wiped off the face of the earth. I-40 through the mountains was gone. They've got one lane. They're building up the side of the mountain to put the highway back right now. It's open, but they're building that mountain back to put the highway back in there. It's incredible what came through here. And until you drive through it, or until you experience, and see some of it, I mean, it's crazy. And I still don't think they've got the death toll reports figured out yet. But, I talked to a guy who's a firefighter, and he was on a boat at the Ingalls warehouse, and there was a bunch of truckers, backed up to the dock, and, the water came up so fast that, they couldn't get away. There wasn't anywhere for them to go. And so they're on boats, but they can't get to the guys that are on the trucks because there's too much debris flowing down in the area, and they're trying to get there, and they're just watching these trucks tip over, and these truckers on top of their trucks, just washing away, just gone. It was mayhem up there. It was crazy. It can't be overstated.
I'm sitting here listening to you, Preston, and I'm getting stressed and anxiety just listening to you. I can't imagine living through it.
But one thing, just back to you going to get those cows and being bullheaded in the morning, that probably actually served you well in that moment. Would you have been able to get those cows back if you didn't go get them?
No, I don't think we could have got across the creeks and the creeks that formed. We probably wouldn't have milked that day, to be honest. But like I say, we didn't have cell phone service. We didn't know what everybody else in the area dealt with, and so we thought we were bad off, and we were, but we thought we were messed up. And I couldn't get to my house, and I was having to hike through the woods and carry supplies in and stuff like that. We had about 35 feet of water run through our bottoms, which those bottoms border the Broad River. We were thinking it was pretty bad. And I was next to tears. I was in tears Sunday morning, just kind of like, what are we going to do? How are we going to make it through this? What's going to, this is bad. This is going to be bad. I couldn't get to the dairy, very easily because we still had trees down across the road, and we were out cutting trees and clearing driveways for people and doing all that kind of crazy stuff. And still trying to milk cows every day and run generators and get diesel fuel for tractors because there was no fuel in the area because everybody's pumps run off electricity. So we were having to drive 2 hours east just to get fuel sometimes, just to get gas, whatever. And I got one phone call from our feed salesman who lives up in Tennessee. And he called me and he told me about everything that was going on up there. And I mean, we only talked for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, but it was enough to smack me in the face and go, you don't have it that bad. You're going to be all right. We're going to get through this. And we did. Our distributor at the time washed away. They were up in Asheville, and their whole warehouse just washed away. They had 12 feet of water run through their warehouse. All their trucks disappeared. Everything that they had was gone. So we had to find a new distributor. We had to, and we did it. And we had everybody, and it wasn't just us. It wasn't just me. We had a whole group of people that were behind us pushing things along and helping make things happen. So, without our community, without the people that got involved, we wouldn't have made it, Brian. Milking the cows that morning was one thing. It's just an example of the things that had to happen. A disaster like that roll through there.
Yeah. And what's running through my head is, adversity tends to bring people together. And boy, did you live that? And
yeah. I mean, it was a blessing in disguise from a sense that, you drive down the road every day and, you get cut off in traffic and you cut somebody out, or, you see something happen that you don't agree with on the news or something like that. And, you go live through a disaster like that where millions of people are impacted, literally. And you see everybody kind of come together, and man, it helps you put down the knives a little bit. And just realize, hey, we're all human beings and we all need each other to get through this. We have this community that is only as big as what you're connected to. And we got connected to a lot of people that way. Just person to person communication of people just showing up. What can I do to help?
Well, it sounds too like, that blessing in disguise wasn't, that what you're sharing, like that community aspect is the ultimate. And I'm just thinking too that, that blessing in disguise was also for your business as well in the end.
Well, yeah, we got a different distributor. We had to get into we're still working with the distributor that got washed away. Those people moved their whole operation from Western North Carolina down to Spartanburg and reopened the doors and started working again with customers, and we're working with them still. But we got another distributor that took our product around to every Earth Fare store instead of just those 6 or 8 that we were in. And Earth Fare was a huge partner through all this to, whether we were getting water up to their Asheville store so that people could come pick up water because there was no potable water in Asheville, to, our packaging company just showing up with truckloads of packaging, to people donating money to pay for packaging. It was just incredible. You think back on it, I'm thinking back on it now, all the people that did something, whether doesn't matter what it was, whether it was dropping off food or whatever for us, or coming and getting with their little lawnmower trailer and getting a pallet of water on it and taking it up to the top of Mount Mitchell, so that people up there would have something. I mean, it was crazy, just incredible, absolutely incredible to see that. But we're still, there's still a lot of people that are, rebuilding. I mean, there's just a lot of work that's still being done, which is kind of where things are at, and it's going to be at for the next couple of years.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're, at home there, you're going through the learning curves of the growth of the business that spurred. But the other thing that was going through my head is, and now you've said you're bottling 100% of the milk, but you commended your team of people that are chipping in every way today. It sounds like this hurricane coming through, that's kind of set the tone for everybody chips in no matter what, and do what you can do.
Yeah, I think the team of people that we have working for us, and I think the days of just doing this on your own and just figuring this out, in the dairy world, milking cows and shipping milk is definitely a hard job. It's definitely a hard lifestyle. You guys deal with this every day in your roles, and the families and the toll that work takes, and it's kind of a labor of love, for most respects, when you're dealing with cow, dairies that are 100 to 150 cows or under 100 cows. But then when you add the bottling aspect into it, the amount of paperwork and testing and verification, because we're not selling just raw milk. Like we have to follow the same PMO that any plant that Organic Valley works with has to follow. We don't get any exceptions. So to have a team of people that is willing to help with the paperwork and help with the bottling aspect and help with dealing with customers and help with deliveries and help with whatever needs to be done, milking cows, whatever. We've been extremely fortunate. I can't say enough about the team members that we've got. So we probably understaffed a little bit, but like you say, everybody just pitches in. We try to manage the week so that everybody can have the weekends, off or some portion of the weekend off. And we try to make sure that our bottling schedule is, such that, we can bottle the milk and get everything else done that we need to do, and work with our customers and pickups and deliveries so that it falls in line with the production schedule. And, it all seems like stuff that, oh yeah, that makes sense. But man, when you're in it every day, you feel kind of stupid when you're doing it the right way, because you did it the wrong way for so long. But we're getting to the point now where it really feels manageable, and that growth of that business on the milk side, because the milk, people, you'll hear people say, yeah, these cows got to get milk twice a day every day no matter what, but you got to bottle that milk every day no matter what also. So it's coming at you whether you want it to or not.
Preston, you mentioned that you've also got heifers coming in. Mm-hmm. So are the sales there to support growth on the farm side?
Well, that's a really good question. I was actually just having a conversation with a local ice cream company, because if your milk supply, right now we're producing about 350 gallons of milk every day with 61 cows. So we're milking about 50.8 pounds per cow at the moment. And it's going to get hot this summer yet. I mean, we're going to see some heat coming, and that's going to cut our production down a little bit. But then in the summertime, people also don't buy as much milk. That's why we have June Dairy Month. People are going on vacation and they're not home as much, so they don't need to go to the grocery store as much. And so, milk isn't necessarily, front of mind. And that's why we work with a diverse customer base. We work with coffee shops and, other food service customers and clients, and we have, multiple products that we can produce to put milk in. But I guess what I'm getting at is fluid milk is such that your production can drop 10%. That can really impact your business. Your sales can drop 10 or 15%. That can really impact your business. And so there's always, George Steeman, kind of the past CEO of Organic Valley, kind of coined the phrase, foot on the gas, foot on the brake, when it comes to sales and supply. And I really see it now. You've always got to be managing that supply coming in, because it's not set, it's not fixed. Your customer base is not, you can take it for granted, but you're going to get an education if you do that. So you constantly have to be talking with customers. You constantly have to have a finger on the pulse of where your supply is going. You constantly have to be at the dairy, managing the cows and making sure the cows are doing what they're doing, so you can keep it as consistent as possible. But at the end of the day, are the sales there? Yeah, I think we're where we need to be at. We need to probably add a few more stores and a few more customers, and we probably could afford to get a few more food service customers on board. But that work is being done, and we're looking at that kind of long term, and also looking at new products that we can produce. Hard dairy is kind of our next foray. Whether we work with somebody to help make cheese, or whether we start making our own butter, or I'm talking with the local business that does ice cream here, and maybe they can co-pack some ice cream for us to just help take out the lumps in our supply, and take out the troughs of our sales demand, so that we can kind of stay more consistent that way. Because we got an 18-day shelf life product, so if you don't have a place to go with it the day after it's bottled, you're behind the 8 ball, and you're going to have negative customer experiences. And when people are paying a premium for milk, you want to make sure it's the best experience they can possibly have. So there's a lot of kind of logistical things that we do on the backside to make sure that that's possible.
We're talking kind of growth now, Preston, but I do want to go back first, and you mentioned, obviously we went through the whole story of growing from that 15% bottle to 100, and beyond the hurricane aspect, what were some of the other growing pains of that type of growth?
Well, I'd said that I worked, spent a lot of time in meat processing plants, but I'd never spent a lot of time in dairy processing plants. Growing up, every county in Wisconsin, every town almost had a cheese plant or a fluid milk plant or both, or had a butter plant or some, but I never got to spend any time in those places. And so learning how to process milk was a big learning curve. Learning how to pasteurize, we vat pasteurize here. We have a vat pasteurized, non-homogenized A2 product. And when you get out and you start working with that Jersey milk that is higher in butter fat by almost 2% than a Holstein cow, and you're not homogenizing, you're not taking any fat out, and you've got this cream line product, and you're having to process and work with that, everything from cleaning things to pasteurizing to how you bottle it, how it's chilled down, and how fast you're chilling it down, and it all was such a learning curve. But we had a good group of customers and a good team kind of working with us, and we were all learning together. And we had a really good group of milk inspectors that helped a lot. You don't hear that a lot, but our milk inspectors were huge assets for us in the beginning. And just helping us, figure out, the ins and outs of what we needed to do to make not just a safe product, but also a product that was, as high quality as you can get. So, the processing side was probably the biggest learning curve that we had. The thing about milking cows is it's like riding a bike. It takes about 5 minutes, and then you're back into the swing of things. So milking cows wasn't that big of a deal. Managing the dairy herd and managing the cows, that was another big learning curve of, what do we got to do to get these cows straight? And it took a full lactation to get some of these cows, in the full swing of their production. But everything, when you're in it and you're doing it, it feels like, oh, this is the worst problem that we're ever going to face. But we had to go through those things, and we had to work through it and keep our heads down. And we kept our heads down and worked through it. And now we're to a point where if there's something off about our quality, if there's something off with the product, or if something's not quite right, we know exactly what went wrong and what to change and what to fix. So, we're constantly refining our process. We're constantly trying to make things better. It's continuous improvement, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of companies are doing this at scale, right? And they're doing a lot of, Organic Valley, for instance, there's a ton of focus on product quality. And so when you're doing it with 60 cows, it seems like some things are kind of redundant, but just it's a constant battle. You have to have a constant look at we've got multiple people on our team trying product and making sure that what comes off the line is exactly what we want, from half and half to heavy cream to buttermilk and fluid milk, our white gallons and white half gallons and chocolate milk. It's really, really an interesting process and how you approach it, because you don't want a negative experience. We can't afford a negative experience. Everything has to be positive and consistent every time. So you don't get to take a step off. You have to keep up the focus, and doing that in a healthy way has been kind of our focus these last few months, really. The unhealthy way is being there for 14 hours trying to figure out what's going on with your bottling machine. And we're working with product, packaging machines and pasteurizers and bottling machines that are, minimum 60 years old. So they're fairly finicky. And so you have to take good care of everything. You have to make sure everything's in really good working order, and you have to understand the quirks of the equipment. So
on your product line, you mentioned the cream on top. Is your whole milk whatever butterfat the cows are, or do you standardize that to a certain fat point?
No, it's whatever the cows are. So we vary. Our butterfat varies different times of the year, anywhere from 5 to 6%. So when you're dealing with a gallon of milk, if 1 week, 1 month you're at 6%, and then the next month you're at 5%, like in the hot months, something like that, it changes. Cow's production goes down a little bit, but butterfat goes up. There is a difference in the cream line product, but our customer base understands that for the most part. Some of our new customers that come into the fold, we have a lot of people. I had somebody bring back 2 gallons of milk to a meat shop we deal with 2 weeks ago now. And the meat shop owner said, yeah, they said it was spoiled. And it was like, well, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And we tried, they brought the product back. So I actually tried it to make sure it wasn't spoiled, because you never know. You don't want to say, it's just the cream line product, it didn't shake it enough. But matter of fact, they didn't shake it enough, and it was a new customer. And so then we just reach out to them. Thankfully the store got their contact information, and I called them personally and talked through it with them and apologized that they didn't quite understand the product necessarily, but thanked them for being a customer. And once I explained to them what they had to do to get the clumps out, shake it a little bit more, they went and got another gallon of milk, and they followed back up and said, this is, after we shook it, it was great. So
I'd just be excited to try a 6% fat chocolate milk.
It's the chocolate milk is the leading cause of diabetes in the Southeast now. People are drinking chocolate milk from us and just raving about it. I was at the propane company paying our propane bill yesterday, and everybody in the store was, once they saw my truck pull up, because my truck's pretty noticeable now. Being a dairy farmer, it's missing a tailgate, and it's missing a mirror on one side, I think. And I just got taillights put in it. But they saw my truck pull up, and they all flocked to the office because they thought I had chocolate milk in my truck. Everybody was there working, and everybody just raves about our chocolate milk. The Jersey cows with the higher protein and higher milk solids, plus the chocolate powder that we're using, and the process that we follow with chocolate milk, it is addicting. to say the least. It's just been one of those products that we took a recipe. We had some other creameries in the area, and we kind of took a couple of different recipes from a couple of different folks. And we didn't ever make chocolate milk before outside of just putting Nestle chocolate in a glass of milk. And so we just kind of started playing around with it. And the first batch we made was just phenomenal. And we were like, well, we're just going to do this. And so it was the first recipe we tried. And man, it's really good.
And I got to ask, Preston, because it's just laying out there that the high fat milk, is that where Big Bottom Dairy comes from?
No, we, our partners, the Beams, we kicked this idea around for over 2 years, and we didn't know what to call it. And, they didn't want to call it Beam Family Farms, or we didn't want to call it Green Family Farm. We didn't want to like call out anybody's, farm specifically. But we were sitting around talking one night about the dairy, and we were getting ready to submit labels, and we finally had to make a decision on what the name was going to be. So we had a few names out there. And my wife just said, what about Big Bottom? We got thinking about it, and we got thinking about what the label could look like. And, the label is a cow facing away from you, looking back a little bit. So you got her butt looking at you, and the mountains in the background. And my wife actually drew the label for it. And we kind of got excited about the marketing ideas and whatnot. So we said, yeah, Big Bottom, that makes sense. And I got talking to my wife one night, and I was like, what made you say that? And she's like, well, that's the name of the pasture that I fell in love with down here. And it seemed like Big Bottom was, the bottom ground here is some of the most fertile ground. She's like, that just seems like it fits for us. And so, Big Bottom was born.
That's interesting. I'm not going to mention the song that's in my head right now. What other products is it just fluid milk?
It's just fluid milk right now. We're separating cream by hand. So we're basically turning our agitator off in our storage tank and draining skim milk off the bottom and making our heavy cream in half and half. Those are our two newest products that are just absolutely phenomenal. We use them here in the house all the time, and they've just been great additions and really a great utilization tool for us. And then we're doing obviously our whole milk, white milk, our chocolate milk, and then we've got a few flavors in pint sizes that we do. Strawberry, which actually doesn't have any strawberry flavoring in it. We use we try to stay as close to natural flavorings as we can. We want a very clean product. So we are actually using a beet juice and beet powder extract to make our strawberry flavor. And then we're doing mocha moo latte. So it's a coffee and chocolate flavor. And then peaches and cream is another one that we do. And down here, anything peach in it is a hit. So that's like drinking a bowl of peach ice cream. And then we're doing buttermilk as well. And the buttermilk, man, I'm not a buttermilk drinker, but people down here drink. There's some people that drink buttermilk, but then we've got a few folks that just make biscuits and bake with it and cook with it and whatnot. And everybody just raves about the quality of it. Because most buttermilk, it in the store is, it's homogenized, so it's not a full fat product necessarily, but that full fat aspect of what we're doing definitely sets us apart. It's definitely a different product. It's not just your everyday milk. And so it's really is kind of becomes an experience for folks.
So I know this is probably too deep of a question, but when you go with your heavy whip what do you do with your skim?
Right now, our skim milk, I don't have a way to capture it because we have to drain it so slow. There's not a way to pump it off or anything. So our skim milk is actually going down the drain at the moment until we can get a cream separator. But I don't know what we would do with our skim whether we make cheese with it or whether we do, whatever we can do with it, we'll find a use for it. But right now the skim just kind of gets tossed away, and it's sad, but we had to figure out how to do it because everyone was demanding it. I mean, there was just a lot of people just asking us when we're going to do heavy cream and half and half.
And that's the one thing that a lot of people don't understand is when you want that high fat product, there's a side effect, and it's called skim milk.
Yep.
And face it, the flavor comes from the fat. So
and all the nutrients come from the fat. The skim milk is it's not nutrient. It's not a void of nutrients. There's still nutrients in it, but as far as the omega-3s and the beta carotenes and the fats, the good fats, the healthy fats, all that B12, all those things come from fat. That's where all the good things about it really are, the high percentage of good things. And so that full fat product, and also being A2 and being non-homogenized, it just changes the flavor, but it also changes the people's experience with the product as well. Folks that maybe I don't want to say are lactose intolerant, but maybe say, the milk maybe makes their tummy upset. The dairy is one of those things that they just don't choose because they can't process it as well. There's been countless people that have reached out, or countless people that have stopped me on the street, or friends of mine that have come down to visit, that just literally thank us for producing that product because they can actually enjoy milk again, which is a lot of fun too.
One thing I was wondering on that, Preston, was on the A2, it sounds like people are learning through experience, but from your sales and marketing side, for lack of a better term, what has been the educational process, or what have you had to do to say what A2 is?
To be honest, Brian, I don't focus on it. We market it on the label. We make sure it's listed on the label so folks that are looking for it can find it. But the biggest thing that people appreciate about our product is that it's local. Being a local dairy, non-homogenized, vat pasteurized, lower processing, less processing is really what people are after. And so once they find out it's A2, it's kind of like icing on the top, because we're as close to raw milk as you can get legally in North Carolina, I guess is the best way to say it. And people want that really fresh product that's got less processing involved. I mean, that's the biggest thing.
So I was going to switch gears entirely away from just the processing and marketing side and ask you. You said you grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, and I'm just thinking, North Carolina. And one thing that I for sure have learned in traveling around the country is there's very much some commonalities across what farmers have to deal with. But of course, there's always those microclimates, the type of soil, just that kind of stuff that you have to learn as you go. So what has been on the actual, the farming side, what's been your learning curve there?
Well, the nice thing is that it's not 40 below and snow up to your knees. Looking back on the dairy experience, my granddad was, my dad was from Virginia, my granddad was from Virginia. And, the thing about Wisconsin and he always said was, man, you can't grow better crops than Southwest Wisconsin. We just had great growing season and great soil type. And, it was really, a phenomenal place to grow feed. But your growing season was, 4 or 5 months, I guess, maybe 3 months, something like that. So Grandpa always said, you work from April through October, basically, night and day, trying to get feed produced. And you can't produce any better feed than here in Southwest Wisconsin, than there in Southwest Wisconsin. But by God, you're going to need it because you're going to spend all winter feeding it. And we did. And that was a big deal. When it started to get cold and we were feeding every day and we had upright silos and we had, harvestors and we piled silage on the ground, and wherever we could put feed, we put feed, and we did it. And you spent all winter keeping water thawed and, freezing your butt off and whatnot. And it's cold here in the wintertime. We're not necessarily set up for once the temperature gets below 20 degrees down here, water lines aren't 4 feet in the ground. There might be 18 inches in the ground. And so you have a few more issues, but really the wintertime is the biggest difference. And the fact that our growing season is so long compared to Southwest Wisconsin is if you do it right, you can pretty much graze year round down here. You feed a little bit of hay, and you have a little bit of stored feed that you have to put up to make it through the winter, depending on how you're managing your farm. But the climate being a little more temperate is definitely one of the things that I've been learning about. The soil type is sandier, and the rain seems to be a little bit more sporadic in this area. So in the summer months, we're you deal with mud in the wintertime, and then you deal with drought in the summertime. But it sounds like everywhere is kind of dealing with that also. So it's not, it seems like it's not exclusive to Western North Carolina, but everybody, and my dad always said this, and when I decided to move to North Carolina, I asked him, I said, does this seem like a good idea to move 1,000 miles, that in a different direction? And he said, I think everybody should move 1,000 miles in their lifetime, because he did it. He moved a herd of dairy cows from Virginia to Wisconsin, and I got a chance to move east and south, and it's been really neat to kind of learn a different area, not necessarily a different way of farming, but everyone does things a little bit different, and so it's been unique to be able to do that in a new place. But for the most part, learning about the soil types, learning about the different grasses that you can either plant, or native grasses. Fescue is a big thing that we deal with down here, and it's interesting how people manage fescue, and it's interesting how people manage those native grasses. But then, you look at what people are interseeding in, and I had a very good opportunity to learn about farming in a big way, because Hickory Nut Gap was working with over 80 farmers at the time, and I got to go out and meet people that were, farming in higher elevations in the mountains, and work with farmers that are, grazing cattle down east and, east towards the coast, and seeing what they were doing and the different grasses that they were growing and promoting on their farms, compared to what people are doing in the mountains. And it's just such a diverse region. The Savory Institute breaks up the region down here, and I think 5 different ecoregions, in the southeast, because of how diverse the climate is. So you can go an hour in any direction from our farm, and the growing, the farming is a little bit different everywhere in any direction you go. So it's kind of unique. It's kind of fun to have that exposure to that.
Where do you see this going?
The podcast or the
no.
No, the milk company, I guess. The big bottom, I don't know, you get thinking about it, and you look at what the future holds, and you look at what the 2-month or 3-month or 5-month plan is, and you look at what the 5-year plan could be, and you look at what the 10-year plan could be, and you look at other dairies and creameries around the area in Virginia and South Carolina, and even in North Carolina, and everybody's doing something just a little bit different. And you try to do things your own way, but then also look at what everyone else is doing a little bit. Kind of pick your head up a little bit and look around and see what else is going on. And there's no such thing as reinventing the wheel. And if you try to reinvent the wheel, you're going to end up with something square that isn't probably going to work. So you want to be mindful of kind of what other folks have tried and done. And if you're going to try something that didn't work for somebody else, you better have a pretty good plan about how you're going to make it successful. But the milking 60 cows is enjoyable. in our setup. We're milking a double 4 parlor. I think 60 cows to 70 to maybe even 80 is probably where the herd size needs to be based on our land base so that we can continue to graze cows effectively. And really, stay true to that grazing aspect. And so I think down the road and looking at where things go as our kids get older and want to get involved, and as we look to the future, the overarching theme for me is not necessarily to go make a bunch of money. My goal in all of this, and even when I told my wife I wanted to full-time farm in 10 years, my goal in all of this is to make sure that if my children choose to farm, that they have a place to go and do that. In 10 years, even in 5 years, I get thinking about this. 5 years, I'm going to have a graduate from high school, and I just hate it. But if she decides that she wants to farm, if any of my 4 kids decide that they want to farm, if any of my partner's children decide that they want to farm, the goal is to have a business built that would allow those kids, however many of them want to, not just the oldest, not just the first boy, but all of them. If they want to farm, that there's an opportunity here for them to be a part of it, and that farm can support them. So building a business that's dynamic enough to support that idea and keep the greens and the beams in agriculture for generations is the idea in what, where this goes. If it stops with me, I failed. But if it stops with me because my kids decided they didn't want to do it and whatnot, that's okay. I'm not going to force them to do it. I'm not going to tell them that they have to. I'm not going to make them feel guilty for not doing it. But it's going to be able to start a dairy and start a farm and start farming at my age, this day and age, with the lack of capital that's out there for people that want to start a dairy. I mean, most banks would laugh you out of the room if you told them you wanted to milk cows. But it'll be almost impossible probably when you look at what the cost of land is going to be in 5 years. When you look at, what the cost of capital is going to be, if it's available even in 5 or 10 years. And so to build a business that would allow for that opportunity of growth when the kids decide they want to do it, if they decide they want to do it, we want to make sure that that's there. So ultimately, I don't know where it goes, other than it better go in a direction that's possible.
That's really cool. Giving kids an opportunity, not forcing them to, but giving them an opportunity if they have an interest is really cool.
We're building our beef business. My wife and I, we run about 70 beef cows, and we're growing that to be hopefully about 150 by the end of next month. And everything we're doing, and my wife finally realized it a couple months ago. She's like, "We're not building this at all for us, are we?" And I was like, "Nope." Nope, we're building this for the kids. So the whole idea is building it with a succession plan in mind at the beginning, where I think a lot of farms struggle with succession planning. We're doing what we can now on the front end, so that the succession plan is a lot easier when the time is right, if the time ever becomes right.
That's really cool. Well, Preston, Brian, do you have anything else for Preston?
No, nothing for me.
This was really cool, really fun conversation. I want to come down there. I may be down there in August, and if I do make it down there, I'll look you up. But this is really exciting. Best of luck to you. Where can they find out where to get your products? How can they find you?
It's funny. We don't do a very good job about talking about ourselves. I think every small business and every company, no matter what size you are, kind of struggles with that. And we've been doing a better job of that. We've got some locations listed on our website of where you can find our products. Our websites, we try to keep it up to date as much as possible. Our Facebook page has been a little bit behind, but our focus has been on just getting the product out there and getting in front of people. And I think over the next couple of months, you'll see more from us from a social media perspective. But you can find ways to buy our product if you happen to be down here on vacation or happen to be coming to the Southeast. If you're not listening to this podcast in the area, you can look on our website at www.bigbottommilkcompany.com. And you can certainly reach out anytime, to any email or any phone number that's listed on the website, and we'll get back to you if you've got questions. And also, we don't ship out of the region. We don't have any online ordering or anything like that. We're pretty analog when it comes to those kinds of things, but we've got a lot of good partners with Ingalls and Earth Fair and Green Hill Store locally, and all these stores, all these folks around here that have just kind of piled in behind us, and they sell our milk every single week, and people in the community that just love it. It is truly a local product.
I love it. Good luck with everything. That's you bit off a lot, and I hope it goes well for you. I can't say I'm jealous of the stress, but I think it's really cool what you're doing. So,
Mike, Mike, I want to say before we go, we bit off a lot. You mentioned the stress, but everybody's stressed in this business. Every farmer that you talk to, anybody doing anything related to agriculture, whether you're a salesperson, whether you're a processing plant, everybody carries a level of stress. And I think everybody carries a level of stress in their life. But the thing that I keep reminding myself is not just that you chose this, but I've been fortunate to be able to live the life that I've lived, learning the sales side, learning the processing side, learning all the things that I've learned, and putting those things to use now, not just to benefit another company like Organic Valley, like I was doing and I was happy doing, but now I get to build something for us. And so, that stress level gets high, but to be honest, it's just a different stress. Everybody carries a level of stress, it seems like, and it's no different than, the time that it takes and the time that you spend. It's all about how you tackle it and how you approach it, and we try to attack it and approach it in the most positive way possible. And that's the fun part about it, is just changing your perspective every day, because you have to.
That's awesome. That's a good way to look at it. So, Preston Green, Big Bottom Milk Company, thank you so much for joining us. This was very enjoyable, and I will come to North Carolina sometime, and I'll stop in.
Yeah, everybody's welcome. Come on.
Thanks, Preston.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mike.